Hey everybody, it's Women for Theology here, and today we're going to be talking about the big question: is the cross a pagan symbol? And if it is a pagan symbol, can it be redeemed? Can the meaning of symbols change, or are they destined as pagan for eternity once used by pagans? But is it even a pagan symbol? We're going to find out. So let's look at the history of the cross today, how it's used in the past, and whether or not we should view it as a pagan symbol and continue to use it. So we'll start off like this. According to Britannica.com, the cross is a symbol of the Christian religion, which we know that, recalling the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and the redeeming benefit of his passion and death. The cross is a sign both of Christ himself and of the faith of Christians. So in case you're not a Christian and you're watching this and you don't know what it means, there you go, that's what it means. But I think most people know that. So something I'm refuting here is the Jehovah's Witnesses say that this is a pagan symbol, and that's why they make such a big to-do about not using crosses and saying that he was crucified on a stake instead of a cross. That's why it's such a big deal, because they're like, oh, it's a pagan symbol, it's a pagan symbol. So this is their claim, and we're going to see if we can refute their claim today. So their claim, according to jw.org, this is verbatim, it says, the cross you see on the steeple of a neighborhood church on its altar and as pendants around the necks of many of your neighbors is actually a pagan religious symbol. It was revered through the pagan world long before the advent of Christianity, and this is admitted by many religious and historical authorities, as we shall see. If you belong to one of Christendom's churches, did the church ever tell you that the cross is a pagan symbol? If it did not, it withheld truth from you. Oh, wow. Okay. It has encouraged you to hold in reverence an admittedly pagan symbol. But you may say, did not the early church regard the cross as a symbol of Christianity? Well, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, no, they did not. It was not until about the middle of the 3rd century of our common era that professed Christians began to use it as such. So then I read this part where they state that out of the Expository Dictionary of the New Testament Words by W.E. Vine, it states on page 256, volume 1, that by the middle of the 3rd century A.D., pay attention to this is actually important, the churches had either departed from or had travestied certain doctrines of the Christian faith in order to increase the prestige of the apostate ecclesiastical system. Pagans were received into the churches apart from regeneration by faith, and were permitted largely to retain their pagan signs and symbols. Hence the tau or the T in its most frequent form, with the cross piece lowered, was adopted to stand for the cross of Christ. Okay, so before you go and think to yourself, oh, well, I guess it's pagan, listen to some of this other information that I found before you make a judgment. There's different things that I found throughout history, some early art depictions, things like that. And I want you to notice and think about who was ruling in the 3rd century, because that's their claim, and that's what it said in the Vine Dictionary. It said that they adopted these pagan symbols in the 3rd century AD, right? So who was ruling in the 3rd century? Constantine. Actually, I made this connection. Constantine was ruling from 306 to 337 AD. And what was Constantine before he became a Christian? He was a pagan, right? And what did Constantine do when he became a Christian? Well, it's believed that Constantine's conversion was actually more politically motivated. Now we don't really know for sure how genuine he was, but it would make sense if he was mixing some paganism in with Christianity. I mean, would it not make sense? He did a lot of changes and things like that, to the Sabbath and all these things, and he wasn't a big fan of the Jews and, all of this stuff. So it's really not hard to believe. Like I said, nobody knows for sure whether he was completely, converted or not, or whether that was more later on in life. But we do know that he mixed a bunch of stuff together. He wanted to appease the pagans and the Christians. He wanted to, kind of like syncretize things. So this could be what the Vine Dictionary is referring to about the 3rd century and using pagan symbols in the church. Okay, so put a pin in that, keep that in mind. Now, I did also find the earliest depiction of a piece of art in the year 200 AD. This is before Constantine, right? It was a piece of Roman graffiti, and it's now on display at the Palatine Hill Museum in Rome. It's actually a slur scratched into a piece of plaster depicting Christ as a crucified donkey worshipped by a local fool. This graffito depicts a donkey's hand nailed to the horizontal crossbeam. So if you look at the photo, if you look it up, it's called the Alexamenos graffito, I believe. So yeah, you can look it up and see what it looks like. It's like a crossbeam. It's not a stake, just an up and down stake. It's a crossbeam. Even though this is a they're basically like mocking him here. But listen to what else, it describes. So it's a person beneath the cross who is dressed like a slave in a short sleeve shirt that extends from the shoulder to a little bit below the waist. He gazes upward at the crucified victim in adoration, as suggested by the inscription, Alexamenos worships God, right? That's what it says. Most likely, although it is not certain, the context of this graffito is one slave mocking another for worshiping the crucified Jesus. The inspiration for this satirical image of Jesus' crucifixion may track back to the Greek and Latin authors who accuse Christians, like the Jews, of worshiping a donkey. Oh wow, that's interesting, huh? In any case, the graffito indicates that even the poor social classes criticize the Christian belief in the crucified Jesus with sarcastic enjoyment. Okay. So, yeah, you can, like I said, you can Google it. You can take a look at what this looks like, and you can see this is in 200 AD, before Constantine and all of that, that they were doing this, and that they depicted this image. So somebody must have knew what it looked like when he was crucified. Now, another thing to consider, I want to talk about. So, the reason why they didn't use the cross in early Christianity was not because it didn't happen, and not because it's not what they use. It's not because it's not what really happened. It's because this was something that was offensive in culture at the time. So before the time of Constantine, Christians were not okay with portraying the cross because it was like an open display that might expose them or ridicule them or put them in danger. So after Constantine converted to Christianity, though, he abolished crucifixion as a death penalty and promoted as a symbol of the Christian faith, both the cross and the Chiro monogram. I don't know if that's the way you say it, but I am not a historian. But of the name of Christ. So the symbols became immensely popular in Christian art and funerary monuments starting in AD 350. So the cross did change over time. Initially, the earliest crucifixes depicted Christ as alive with eyes open and arms extended, like his Godhead manifest, even though he is pierced and dead in his manhood. So it was a little bit different. But by the 9th century, however, artists began to stress the realistic aspects of Christ's suffering and death, and Western portrayals of the crucifixion, whether painted or carved, exhibited an increasing finesse for suggesting the pain and the agony of the cross. So it did start to change over time, and by the 16th century, with the Protestant Reformation and Lutherans and all of that, the Reformed churches, however, resisted such use of the cross until the 20th century, when ornamental crosses on church buildings and on communion tables began to appear. So generally, the Lutherans retained the ornamental and ceremonial use of the cross. So it did change over time. And there is some other information about the cross that we're going to talk about historically now outside of Christianity. And of course, Protestants today, use crosses, with anything, without any body on it or whatever, we just wear crosses and stuff like that. Okay. So As far as historically outside of Christianity, there were four basic types of cross representations. So they had the Greek cross, which was like a lowercase t. The Latin cross was like an uppercase T. The St. Anthony's cross was like an X. And this was in the tradition of the way St. Andrew the Apostle was martyred. Okay. And the tradition favors that the Latin cross was the way Christ died. So the tradition says that it was like the big uppercase T. But some some do believe that it was in the shape of the St. Andrew's T, like the X. So we don't really know for sure. So crosses were used as symbols in other religious uses long before Christianity. Now, not the same crosses as we see today, like the T, like the lowercase t, or even an uppercase T. What they're talking about here are other. They don't really look the same. It doesn't look the same. People say, "Oh, there were crosses way before," but I mean, when you hear what these are, you're not really going to think the same as a Christian cross. But let's see what history has to say. Okay, so there's two main types of pre-Christian crosses, and you're gonna really be surprised what you hear about this. Okay, so the first one is the ancient Egyptian ankh, which is kind of like a lowercase t with a circle or like a handle type thing on top. You can Google what the ankh looks like if you don't know. It was adopted and extensively used actually by the Coptic Christian monuments. So it was an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph signifying life. So to the ancient Egyptians, it was actually a life-giving talisman, and it was often held or offered by Egyptian gods and pharaohs. So, it was used in the pagan way. But get this, the Ankh has been adopted by Coptic Christians today as a representation of eternal life through Jesus Christ. Oh, wow. I bet you didn't know that. The Copts believe that the Ankh not only symbolizes physical life, but also spiritual life and the promise of eternal life in the afterlife. So you got to ask yourself, can these things ever be redeemed? Apparently, the Egyptian Coptic Church believes that it can. Okay. So then let's talk about the second one. This one was mind-blowing for me. The actual the thing that they consider a second use of cross is actually a swastika. I was like, hold up. I was like, no, there's no way, right? But listen to the information about this. This is information I was surprised to learn as well as doing my research. So apparently it was marked on many early Christian tombs as a veiled symbol of the cross. What? Are you kidding me? Now before you freak out and say, "Oh, Christians are Nazis." Okay, don't even go there because they're definitely not. It was actually also used in many other contexts way before the Nazis got a hold of it. So this is actually a good example of how symbols and meanings and words can change throughout time. So this is something to think about and consider. So it was a favorite symbol in ancient Mesopotamia coinage. In Scandinavia, the left hand swastika was a sign for the god Thor's hammer. The swastika also appeared in early Christian and Byzantine art, and it occurred in South America and Central America among the Mayans, and in North America among the Navajos as well. Wow, not just a Nazi symbol, I guess. So in India, it was actually used as well for a symbol of good fortune in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhists. Apparently, in Jainism, it was a symbol of their seventh saint and is also said to remind the worshiper by its four arms of the four possible places of rebirth and the animal or the plant world in hell, earth, or the spirit world. So that's pretty interesting. For Hindus, it was the mark of the opening pages of their ancient books, thresholds, doors, and offerings. In Buddhism, it symbolized the feet or the footprints of Buddha. Who would have thought? Who would have ever thought? And of course, we all know what it was used for in Nazi Germany, okay? If you don't know what it was used for, you've been living under a rock. But yeah, definitely, Hitler with the killing the Jews, and it was an anti-Semitic organization. So, and that's no good. And today it's retained by neo-Nazi groups. So that's what it means today. But before all of that, it had all these other uses, which is insane to me. There's no way I could use any of it because it's just the connotation of what it means today. I just no. So yeah, so going back to the Christian cross, so as far as history goes, the Roman crucifixion, according to Britannica, there were various methods of performing the execution. Usually the condemned man, after being whipped or scourged, was dragged to the crossbeam of the cross to the place of punishment where the upright shaft was already fixed and lifted up into the ground. So the Greek and Latin words corresponding to the crucifixion applied to many different forms of painful execution, including being impaled on a stake, affixed to a tree, an upright pole, or to a combination of an upright, of something upright and a crossbeam. So it really could have been any of these, right? And as far as the description goes for Roman crucifixion, historically, like we said, they were scourged and stripped down naked. They were bound fast with outstretched arms to the crossbeam or nailed firmly to it through the wrist. Now, before you say, what do you mean they were nailed to the wrist? Didn't Thomas just say yesterday in your video that unless he puts his fingers in the holes in the hands where the nails were? Well, let me just clarify that. The Greek word for hands can actually mean hand or wrist. So, just before you say, like, didn't you say that that's what it says? So after that, the feet are bound. They, put the cross up in the air, and usually they would die of a combination of constrained blood circulation, organ failure, and asphyxiation as the body strained under its own weight, and death could be hastened by shattering the legs with an iron club and prevented them from supporting their own body weight and made inhalation more difficult, so they would asphyxiate or go into shock. Sorry I didn't put a trigger warning before that. Yeah, but you know what? It is gruesome, and, maybe we need to know that. Maybe we really need to think about what he did for us, and how gruesome and horrific that it was and how much he suffered. Like, this was one of the worst ways to die in that time. I can't even imagine just lifting my arms up in the air and keeping them upright like that for a few minutes. It becomes painful after a while, so imagine just being up there for hours and just dying of asphyxiation. Yeah, it's awful. Bad way to die. So I wanted to give all of this information and all these definitions for you to think about all these things when you're hearing information like that. These, like, oh, the cross is pagan and we shouldn't use it and stuff like that. But apparently, symbols do change throughout time. Even if Constantine did put this in as a pagan symbol initially, back in the day, they used the swastika for other stuff, and then now it's something bad, right? Why couldn't it go the other way, right? Like the Ankh, it was like a pagan thing, and now the Coptic Christians have made it something good, and they're putting it, towards Jesus. Good for them, I wouldn't use it personally because, like I said, I don't have any ties to that, but culturally for them, I guess it does. So, and think about it too. Even wedding rings were pagan. Are you not going to wear your wedding ring now? I'm just saying. So these are all things to think about. Especially when you hear these things from other people and from Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that. But this is to give you information, all the history, so you can make a decision for yourself. I personally, my opinion is I think it's fine to wear a cross because you're not wearing it in the pagan symbol of Tammuz. That's not what you're thinking or what you're doing, and it's not your intention at all. It's not, people don't even know that I don't think anybody knows that would wear a cross ever. And the definition of it has changed from ancient Mesopotamia. Okay, that's not what it means anymore. Just like I said the other day, you got the rainbow. We used to look at the rainbow as just something beautiful in the sky and the covenant between God and us, from Genesis. And now they've taken the rainbow to mean something totally different, and now it means, LGBTQ, and that anybody's wearing it, that's what somebody thinks that they are. So, like I said, symbols change throughout time. You have to make your own decision of how you feel about it. But honestly, I don't see a problem with it, and as of today, it's not pagan. It's just not. Nobody thinks it's pagan. Nobody's using it as a pagan symbol. And even the early cross symbols didn't look like the one now. And we do have art dating all the way back to 200 AD showing that the symbol that Jesus was crucified on was a cross. It was a T cross. It wasn't like the stake like the Jehovah's Witnesses say. Of course, like I said, we don't know 100%. But let me know what you think.